Okay, moving on to the next chapter. This is chapter 11 in understanding human communication. Again, in the group chapters, there may be some different things. All I can do is lecture from it from this perspective because it's the only book I have right now. I may have to redo this later, but for now, this is going to be it. Chapter 11, solving problems in groups and teams. We're going to talk about that. Talks about when and why we want to do problem solving in groups. There are some advantages of group problem solving. One is that more resources than you might have if doing it by yourself. There is a greater chance and of accuracy, increased likelihood of catching errors. There's an old proverb that says, "In the multitude of counsel, there is safety." If you get a number of different people's opinions about something, that can be safer than doing the decision all by yourself. There's commitment, even if say it's a church and maybe there's 100 members, but they pick 10 different members to solve a problem from all around the church, and the different people, those 10 people know everybody in the church, and those 10 come together and they make a decision, help the pastor of the church make a decision, however it may be. If there's an advisory council, maybe that's how the decision's made. When having had everyone consulted and everyone feeling like they had a part of it because someone they knew was in helping make the decision, there's a greater commitment to that process and to that decision that has been made. Also, diversity comes into play. By having a group solve a problem, you bring in people with diverse backgrounds and with diversity, and then you try to create a solution for the problem that helps not just one person or two people, but tries to help everybody in some way. When to use group problem solving is the job beyond the capacity of one person. It may be something very simple. It might be a simple thing where you ask one person who has some sort of expert power on it, and they say, here's the way to solve that problem. And that's it. Are the individual's tasks interdependent? And if they're not, really being in a group in which you're not interdependent and your tasks aren't interdependent is very frustrating. I used to be working television. I was in the VTR room. We primarily interacted with all the production people. We were never in the production meetings for a long time. And we were in the engineering meeting. And I'm sitting, and when I was the head of the VTR room for a while, I would sit in the engineering meetings and listen to these guys talk about fixing this or fixing that. And it's like they're speaking some other language from some other planet or something. I had no idea what they were talking about. And it didn't necessarily affect me because I wasn't someone who fixed machines. Finally, they did a change and they moved me over to the lead VTR guy over to the production meeting, which was very enlightening. Because what I found out was the different directors and different assistant directors and the different people who were getting things done, when they were called upon to ask why they hadn't gotten something done, they would say to the producer or the people in the meeting, say, well, VTR doesn't have me in my tape yet. Some of those people were very frustrated having VTR in the room because I would turn and say, well, we put that on your desk. And a lot of times I would know the exact time of day or date. We put that on your desk 2 days ago. I know that you have it. I put it on your desk myself. Oh, sorry about that. So, is there more than one decision or solution? Sometimes there's only one solution for a problem. If a problem, maybe you're talking about churches. Maybe you need more parking space. Well, let's maybe buy the land next to it and increase the size of the parking lot. Might be only one problem. Is there potential for disagreement? Sometimes we all kind of know what the solution is. Man, I need a good group meeting to solve it. Anyway, so that's a question that you would ask as well. Setting the stage for problem solving. You want to maintain positive relationships in a group. Try to build cohesiveness in a group. You do that a lot of times through group activities and sort of creating a group identity. And that helps you build group cohesiveness. You want to focus on shared or compatible goals and recognize the progress toward the goals. If we don't recognize progress toward a goal, then we don't feel involved as we should. Establish shared norms and values. It's good to minimize perceived threats between members. Emphasize our interdependence in a group. That helps create this more cohesive group. Try to recognize and thwart threats from outside of the group. Try to develop a mutual liking and friendship. Friendships and liking each other goes a lot. Shared group experiences is really, really interesting. Shared group experiences are very important for building group cohesiveness. I was a church pastor for about 8 or 9 years, and we were discussing various things we could do to build attendance and build involvement in the church. we decided a very simple thing is we were going to have more church socials and activities. So we tried to schedule a church social activity once a month. We started doing a pastor's pancake breakfast. The pastors and their wives, myself, the other co-pastor, and his wife, we would come together and we would make breakfast for the church. And I'll tell you something. Some of these days, we had 1 month where we were, no one to bring anything. We were just buying pizza for everybody. Pizza was brought in. Everybody enjoyed it. Pizza and various sodas, pop, tea, whatever it might be. And it was really interesting. Over the course of the year, we had increased our attendance by 20%. We hadn't even really talked about donations, but the donations had gone up in the area of 40%. Anyway, recognizing stages of team development. One is just sort of orientation, getting to know each other. Then as you start to discuss ideas and discuss solutions, there will be a time where conflict is a part of that process. Again, that's not a negative thing. Emergence, slowly but surely, as we discuss those, along the way, a solution, one particular solution or two, or one particular path to take, something like that will emerge and will sort of emerge out. And then once we've all made that decision, there's a reinforcement stage where we sort of reinforce and talk to each other about why this is the right decision that we made. If you're wondering about the reinforcement stage, if you remember ever going with your parents when they went to buy a car, you will notice as they went home, they told each other why they made the right decision to buy the car right now and why this car was the right car and all those other good things. That's the reinforcement stage. Some group problem solving strategies and formats, some different formats you can do is breakout groups where people go out and bring in solutions to the major group. Problem consensus. That can help equalize participation. Everybody does a separate card to list their ideas. You can have focus groups where people stop and they focus on certain aspects of something. A group might follow parliamentary procedure. You can have a panel discussion with a moderator, discuss a problem from various angles. You might have a symposium where the topic's divided up in a way where each member delivers some in-depth information about a certain aspect of the topic they've been assigned, but without interruption. They're basically doing a speech in the group. A forum allows non-members to add their opinions to the group's deliberations before the group makes a decision. We did this as church pastors. We had a time where we were going to have an advisory council meeting. Usually the church pastors didn't meet with the advisory council, but there were some things we needed to decide, and we're going to have an advisory council meeting. We told the church that after church this week we're going to have an advisory council meeting. But before we do that, we want everybody to come. Just everybody come. We're going to serve some snacks and come and we're going to discuss some things and let everybody have some input. And then after everybody's had some input, then the advisory council is going to sit down and we're going to make some decisions. Of course, dialogue is incredibly important. Dialogue is incredibly important as we talk about solutions and listen to each other and create a dialogue. Very, very important thing. I talked about solving problems in virtual groups. The principles are all very much the same. It's good to have a good connection. It's good to know how to frame yourself so that the way you present yourself is good on television and media. You may notice that I tend to frame. I don't have my head down here. That's not television production standards. I have my head about 2/3 to 3/4 of the way up on the screen and somewhat centered. I'm not typically off to one side talking to you. I did TV production for about 17 years, so I know a few things about that. And so those are some of the things that come into play with virtual groups. Sometimes people don't really understand how to present themselves on camera. I've had people in group meetings with my students who clearly were not ready for the group meeting. They just popped in anyway, and they really probably should have. Literally, I've seen laying in bed, who are like, get out of bed, go put some clothes on. Don't lay in bed. It's just not the right way to do that. Okay. Some approaches and stages in problem solving. A very structured way is to identify the problem. By the way, a lot of this is exactly the same as we talked about when we talked about managing conflicts and win-win problem solving. Identify the problem. If you don't identify the problem, you may not solve it. This thing about a churching, going back to the idea of a church, maybe a church says, well, we need more members. Maybe we're not well enough known, so the church donates money and they spend money on, maybe local radio. Maybe they do a billboard. Maybe they do flyers. And people come and people leave, and people come and people leave. Maybe the problem was the church wasn't friendly enough. You want to identify the problem. What is the problem? That's what you need to figure out. Analyze it. Try to word it as a broad, open question. Identify different criteria for what success represents. We will know we've solved this problem when, and well, what are those criteria? Gather relevant information. You want to identify supporting and restraining forces. There are limits to a group might be meeting for helping a church increase their attendance and say what we want to do is we want to do radio, television, advertising, billboards, and so we have $100 budget. Oh, well, let's do flyers. You need to know what the various restrictions are. Develop creative solutions. Brainstorming is very good. Criticism is forbidden. Share whatever comes to mind. Share a lot of ideas, and then you sort of put those ideas together and start to evaluate them later. It talks about the nominal group technique. Each member works alone to develop a list of possible solutions. Then, in round robin fashion, each member in turn offers one item from their list, and it's listed on a chart visible to everyone. And a lot of times you'll see that items start to overlap, where different people have the same idea. Then each member, after they're all on the board, each member privately ranks his or her choice of the ideas in an order, with most preferable and the least preferable. Then that's collected, and the top ideas are retained and then discussed as the most promising solutions. And after that, we work toward making the solution. Evaluate the possible solutions. Ask yourself questions. Will this proposal produce the desired change? Will it actually solve the problem? Can it be implemented by the group? Do we have the abilities and the resources to do this? Does it contain any disadvantages? Another question. Implement the plan. You want to go out and implement the plan. And again, we go back to this idea of we've created a solution. If we don't then go out and enact the solution, we didn't get anything done, did we? Identify specific tasks that need to be accomplished. Define individual responsibilities to do that. And plan ahead for emergencies. And then just follow up. Meet once in a while to evaluate how the progress is going. Different decision-making methods, consensus. Basically, everyone agrees. Hard to accomplish sometimes, but if everyone agrees and everyone has agreed on the solution, and everyone voted yes, then no one is disengaged from it because they were part of it. A majority, you can say, well, majority controls. If you have a group of, maybe you have a church advisory council of 9, and you're doing majority control 5-4. Well, 4 people may not be happy with the solution. On the other hand, you might not be able to get 9 to all agree. So there are different elements there that come into play. Expert opinion. Sometimes someone will go out and they'll hire an expert to come in and solve the problem. Minority control. Believe it or not, sometimes we hand it to the minority, and that sounds odd. The way I think of it is this: if you've got a church advisory council of 9 or 11, 12 people, whatever it might be, there may be 2 or 3 people in that council that are very, very social. They're the ones that are always planning the group activities. So if you're planning an upcoming activity, instead of saying, well, let's let the group decide, you might say, well, how about you 3 or 4? You guys decide on what we want to do next. And because you're the ones who plan so many of them anyway. It's a minority control, but we know who does some of these things. And then sometimes there's just authority rules. The group leader makes the decision. That's done. Some dangers in group discussion. There's information underload. We give you very little information, then we ask you to vote on a solution. That doesn't necessarily help out. And there's information overload. We give you so much information, you don't have enough time to process it. Then we ask you to make a decision, but you haven't really had time to process all this information we gave you, and you had too much information in the first place. A real danger in group discussion is unequal participation. I like to give the example in class of you're working on the job, and maybe they've taken out of 100 people that work there, or 50 people that work, they've taken 5 and asked them to do proposals for making more money for the company and controlling costs and increasing profit. And if out of that 5 people, 1 person doesn't say anything, the other 4 have all these solutions. But if that 1 person has the idea that's going to make us all into millionaires, don't we want to hear that 1 person? Well, of course we do. But you really do need to try to create equal participation. There can be a pressure to conform. That can be problematic. It talks about groupthink. You want to avoid groupthink. Recognize early warning signs of it. Try to minimize status differences. And make respectful disagreement the norm. It's okay to disagree. It's okay to disagree with each other. Whether it's in a group or whether it's in marriage, it's okay to disagree. But if we disagree in a disagreeable way, that's problematic. That's problematic. And that's the end of chapter